All right, coming back to your board, you've made your cuts. We're gonna assume that my board is full of pictures and I've got tons ready to go ahead and apply to my board. What I want you to be really considerate about is that your images need to be cut very straight and they need to be applied in the same fashion. And so if you know that your board was cut by a machine, perhaps you went to Plaza and had them cut it for you, and you know that your images have been cut very, very straight, you may be comfortable simply aligning your straight edge to this straight edge and hoping that everything's gonna sort of work itself out across the board. But I do want to caution you that if this is a little bit crooked and then you apply this using this as my guide and then this is a little bit crooked, by the time you get to the other side of the board, things are going to start to look cockeyed. And what I find really helpful, again, you've got this ruler, it reaches all the way across your board. I find it helpful to just go ahead and line up one of those straight lines up against the edge, make sure it's lining up here as well, and go ahead and create some guide marks. Okay. And if you do that as you're placing things, it just depends on how perfectly and precisely you're creating these lines, but it just gives you a guide as you work your way across. And it doesn't have to be, every inch. I usually use the ruler. This is 2 inches, and then I'll go in the other direction. Again, I do this direction first where my ruler goes all the way across. And then I'll work horizontally, again, lining up a line over here at the edge, and then ensuring that the line meets the pencil lines that I've created. Okay, so again, I've got 2 reference points to verify that this is a straight ruler across, and I can go ahead and make lines in the other direction. Okay, again, this is particularly helpful if that maybe you're not sure that your cuts are perfectly straight, or maybe you just have the sense that, I actually kind of want to start in the middle of my board and work out. Okay, this will make you feel much more confident in doing that. Okay, in this case, I'm actually not going to use this board for showing you adhesions. This is the only really clean, perfect board I have at this point. So I'm going to come over here to one of my scrap pieces. Okay, just for the sake of sustainability and not wasting. And I'll just do some quick adhesions on this. Now, to paste this to your board, I want you to remember that this is paper, and this is paper that is covering your board. And one of the best tools for this is rubber cement. It's cheap, it dries quickly, it works really well. Now, I did in the supply video talk to you about some other supplies that you can think about but are not required. And I have had students in the past use spray adhesives. From what I understand, those work really, really well. They're just pricier, and you can't do that in your room, okay? Because that's the smell of that is gonna just get everywhere. But if you're interested in using that kind of supply, we're in a warm season, you can do that outside if you'd like to, okay? But I'm gonna stick with what's cheap. And because I have some tape over here on this side, I'm actually just gonna turn my board. And as I prepare to glue this down, what I want you to do is, again, just like using your blade, I want you to think about protecting your surface. And so what I'm gonna do is grab a magazine, and I will use that as a buffer as I apply my rubber cement. Okay, and you're gonna see that when you open this up, there's a brush. Okay, try to get some of this off. This is a new bottle, so it's like real loose and runny. So I'm gonna brush some of that off. And you're gonna want to cover this piece of paper all the way from the edge to the other edge. It's got to be fully coated. If you don't, okay, you're gonna have peely edges. And that is a no-no. So make sure that when you put this down, it is fully wet and covered with glue, okay? Now, if you were brushing this and you feel like I can't really see, did I get it? The glue is wet, so if you pick it up and just hold it to the light, you can see, okay, it looks like I got all of the areas. And then what I'm gonna do, okay, I'm just doing this again quickly for the sake of the video. I'm gonna go ahead and say that everything's perfect over here on this edge. I'm gonna line it up here, and then I'm gonna smooth it out, okay? You wanna give it a good pat down, make sure that it is really down and smooth, and then put something heavy on top, okay? Again, this is a magazine, but a textbook would work better. go ahead and leave that, let it dry, and then just go work in another area. I could do the same thing, put glue, go place my images over here if I have a good sense of where everything is going to lay out. Okay, it's really critical that you let this dry all the way, because again, we're gonna be doing, we're putting glue on glue. So if I go ahead and put rubber cement on this and I follow directions and I overlap this to make sure that there's no background showing, if I do wet and wet and wet, I'm gonna increase my chances that this bubbles and wrinkles and looks really hideous, okay? So again, this is why I tell you, don't do this the night before, okay? Do it in stages. Maybe you spend 20 minutes gluing and you go and do something else and then come back and work on this a little bit more, okay? So you will work your way all across the board, fill this in its entirety. Again, let it dry. And then when you're ready to do your pop-ups, you're actually gonna use the exact same technique. And so I'm actually gonna just use this again for the sake of the video so you're not sitting in front of your computer screen too much. But when you're ready to do your pop-up, it's the exact same strategy. You will apply this to your scrap board. You're gonna absolutely wait for this to dry, because again, if this is wet and you go to try to cut through this paper and through the board, your blade will likely snag it or tear it. So please make sure that that's dry. I will tell you to practice, because cutting through paper is one thing, and I've already told you to stand up and put your weight on the ruler. Cutting through all of this, okay, it's gonna require a little bit of muscle and a little bit of weight. So again, if you weren't standing up previously, make sure you're standing. Okay, make sure it's absolutely dry. Okay, sorry, that's my dog barking. Okay, make sure you have something behind it to protect your furniture. And it's essentially the same technique. It's just, it's a little bit more muscle. So you want to make sure that you perfectly align your image with your foam core. So you don't want to be trying to eyeball this and come, say, oh, am I at the edge? Does this look right? Because when your pop-up goes on, you don't want like a little black border on it like there is here. So I'm actually going to leave just a little bit of room, okay, to make sure again that I'm cutting through my image and I'm cutting through my board, okay? My hand is shaking a little bit, okay? It's a little bit tough to cut through that. Okay, and you'll see, obviously I've cut some of that picture away to ensure that I have a really clean edge. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. And I hope you're noticing that, of course, I have not marked anything. I'm eyeballing this again just for the sake of the video, but you want to mark it and make sure that you're cutting really nice straight lines, okay? Now, hopefully you saw too that as I cut this, it caught my picture and pulled it. Again, I didn't let this dry, and that's definitely something that you want to make sure you do. Let it dry before you attempt to cut this. And if you know that your blade is maybe getting a little bit funky, this is also a time to replace your blade. You don't want to be, forcing a dull blade through all of these layers. All right, so cut through the 3 sides, okay? And I want to make sure that you see that my pop-up absolutely aligns with my picture. Okay, there's no overhang, there's no puck marks. This all looks really nice. This is a perfect cut. Okay, this one looks pretty good, but you'll see that because my paper was wet, it's a tiny bit ripply. And then on this side, it tore. Okay, again, because this was wet. All right, so that's what your pop-up will look like. You'll go ahead and do that for all of your pop-ups. Again, as I said on the call, and I think in the previous video, odd numbers of pop-ups tend to look really nice. So go ahead, if you're doing 3, go ahead and get those all cut out and ready. And then when you're ready to put them on your board, okay, again, your board will be fully covered. You will decide where you're gonna place this. You'll go ahead and eyeball it and make sure that that looks nice. Again, use your ruler, okay? If you know that this is floating in the middle, it's gonna be really hard to place that perfectly straight. So grab your ruler, okay? Make a mark and say, I know that it needs to start there, and from here, I want it to end here, whatever the case may be. Okay, so you've got a couple little marks for yourself. All right, I'll be back in a moment to run through applying your pop-up and how to apply your tape.